Discipline is not about making your life smaller. It is about removing the chaos that prevents you from living deliberately. Most people do not lose control of their lives in one dramatic moment. They lose it through small acts of neglect repeated every day. They wake up without a plan, react to messages, postpone important tasks, allow their environment to become disorganized, spend hours consuming information, and then wonder why they feel exhausted without having accomplished what truly matters. Control your time before it controls you, because time is one of the few resources you can never recover once it has been spent. Money can be earned again, opportunities can return, and mistakes can sometimes be corrected, but yesterday cannot be purchased back. Yet people often treat time as though it were unlimited. They give their best hours to distractions, other people's demands, meaningless conversations, endless scrolling, and tasks that create the feeling of productivity without producing meaningful results. Then, when the day is almost finished, they try to squeeze their important goals into whatever energy remains. This creates frustration because the problem is not always a lack of time. It is often a lack of deliberate control over time. Organizing your life begins with understanding where your hours actually go. For several days, observe your normal routine without judging yourself. Notice how much time disappears into your phone, entertainment, unnecessary conversations, waiting, procrastination, and repeated decisions. You may discover that small periods of wasted time are consuming far more of your day than you realized. Once you see the pattern clearly, you can begin changing it. The first principle is to identify your priorities. Not every task deserves equal importance. Some activities directly move your life forward, while others simply keep you busy. Ask yourself which responsibilities create the greatest consequences if ignored, and which actions contribute most to your long-term goals. Give those activities your strongest attention. Do not automatically give your best hours to whatever happens to demand attention first. If your mind is strongest in the morning, protect that period for important work rather than giving it away to random notifications. If you have limited energy after work or school, design your schedule around that reality instead of pretending you can operate at maximum capacity all day. Time management is therefore also energy management. Another important principle is to create boundaries around your attention. A schedule becomes meaningless if every notification can interrupt it. Turn off unnecessary alerts. Set specific periods for checking messages. Keep your phone away during important work. Let people know when you are unavailable if necessary. You are not required to respond immediately to every request simply because technology makes immediate communication possible. Constant availability can create the illusion that you are being productive while actually destroying your concentration. Learn to distinguish between urgent and important. An urgent message may demand attention because someone else wants a response, but that does not automatically make it important to your life. Important work often requires uninterrupted time and may not create immediate pressure. If you only respond to urgency, your priorities will constantly be pushed aside by other people's agendas. Planning can protect you from this. Before the day begins, identify the few tasks that matter most. You do not need an enormous list. A short list of meaningful actions is often more useful than 20 tasks that you will never finish. You can make better decisions throughout the day. If an unexpected opportunity appears, you can ask whether it supports your priorities or simply distracts you. You should also leave some space in your schedule. A life organized down to every minute can become fragile because unexpected events are inevitable. Give yourself room for delays, problems, rest, and recovery. Discipline does not mean filling every available minute with work. Rest is part of effective time management because exhaustion reduces judgment and concentration. At the end of the day, review how you used your time. Do not turn the review into self-punishment. Instead, identify patterns. What consumed too much time? What important task did you postpone? Which distraction repeatedly appeared? What can you change tomorrow? Small adjustments can create major differences over months. When you begin controlling your time, you are not simply becoming more organized. You are deciding what your life will receive your attention. Every hour you protect from meaningful work becomes an investment in your future. Every unnecessary distraction you remove creates space for something more valuable. Eventually, your schedule begins reflecting your priorities rather than your impulses, and that is where real organization begins. Create order in your environment because the world around you constantly influences the way you think, behave, and use your energy. Many people try to become more disciplined while continuing to live inside an environment that encourages distraction and disorder. They leave important things scattered, allow their workspace to become cluttered, keep unnecessary notifications active, and surround themselves with objects and information that constantly compete for attention. Then they wonder why concentration feels difficult. Your environment may not determine everything you do, but it can make certain behaviors easier and others harder. If you want to organize your life, begin by making your surroundings support the person you are trying to become. Look at your room, desk, phone, computer schedule, and even the people you spend the most time around. Each one can either reduce friction or create it. A cluttered workspace forces your mind to process unnecessary visual information. You may sit down intending to work and suddenly notice papers, objects, unfinished tasks, or other things demanding attention. Even if you ignore them consciously, they can create background mental noise. A cleaner environment reduces those competing signals. This does not mean your surroundings must become perfectly organized or visually impressive. The goal is functionality. Everything you frequently use should have a place. Everything you no longer need should be removed, stored, or discarded. When you finish using something, return it to its proper place rather than allowing small acts of disorder to accumulate. These simple actions create a sense of control. Your digital environment deserves the same attention. Your phone can become one of the most disorganized environments in your life. Hundreds of notifications, unnecessary applications, endless messages, and distracting content can keep your attention fragmented. Remove applications that repeatedly waste your time. Turn off notifications that are not genuinely important. Organize your files and frequently used tools. Create a cleaner digital space so that opening your device does not immediately expose you to dozens of competing demands. The purpose is not technology avoidance, it is technology control. Your environment should make your priorities easier to follow. If you want to read more, keep the book accessible. If you want to exercise, prepare your equipment in advance. If you want to study, keep your workspace ready. If you want to eat more intentionally, organize your available food around your goals. Preparation reduces the number of decisions required when the moment arrives. This matters because discipline becomes easier when the desired behavior is convenient. You should also recognize that people are part of your environment. The emotional atmosphere surrounding you can affect your habits and thinking. If you constantly spend time in conversations centered around gossip, negativity, conflict, or distraction, it becomes harder to maintain a focused mindset. You do not need to reject everyone who thinks differently from you, but you should notice how relationships affect your energy and behavior. Spend more time with people who encourage growth, honesty, responsibility, and constructive thinking. Creating order also means creating clear boundaries. Your environment should contain spaces and times associated with specific purposes. When possible, use one area for focused work and another for relaxation. This helps your mind recognize the difference between concentration and rest. A consistent environment can become a psychological signal. When you enter that space, you know it is time to work. The same principle applies to your schedule. Random commitments create mental clutter just as physical clutter does. Organize appointments, responsibilities, and important tasks so you are not constantly trying to remember everything at once. External order reduces internal pressure. You will still encounter unexpected problems, but you will have a stable foundation from which to handle them. The deeper purpose of organizing your environment is to remove unnecessary friction between intention and action. When your surroundings support your goals, you spend less energy fighting distractions and more energy creating results. Order does not guarantee success, but disorder often creates obstacles that never needed to exist. By deliberately shaping your physical, digital, social, and mental surroundings, you make discipline easier to practice every day. Build non-negotiable daily habits because your life is shaped less by occasional moments of motivation and more by the actions you repeat when nobody is watching. Many people wait for the perfect mood before they begin important work. They tell themselves that tomorrow they will wake earlier, exercise, study, organize their responsibilities, or finally complete the project they have been delaying. The problem is that tomorrow always gives them another opportunity to postpone. Motivation is unpredictable. It rises when you feel inspired and disappears when you feel tired, disappointed, bored, or overwhelmed. If your progress depends on motivation, your life will constantly move forward and backward. Discipline begins when certain actions stop being optional. A non-negotiable habit is something you have decided to do regardless of whether you feel like doing it. This does not mean forcing yourself into an unrealistic schedule. It means identifying the behaviors that genuinely matter and giving them a fixed place in your life. Start with a small number of habits. If you attempt to transform everything at once, you may create an enormous routine that becomes impossible to maintain. Choose a few actions that support your most important goals. Perhaps you decide to exercise every morning, spend an hour developing a valuable skill, keep your workspace organized, or complete your most important task before entertainment. The specific habits will depend on your life, but consistency is the essential principle. A habit becomes powerful through repetition. The first few days may require conscious effort, but repeated behavior gradually becomes more automatic. This is why you should focus on consistency before intensity. You do not need to perform perfectly every day. You need to return to the habit repeatedly. Missing one day does not destroy discipline. Turning one missed day into an entire week does. If something interrupts your routine, return as quickly as possible instead of waiting for a perfect restart. Your daily habits should also be connected to clear triggers. For example, after waking up, you might immediately make your bed and prepare for exercise. After breakfast, you might begin your most important study session. After finishing work, you might spend a specific period organizing tomorrow. Linking behaviors together reduces the number of decisions you need to make. Eventually, one action becomes a signal for the next. You should also remove unnecessary negotiation with yourself. If you have already decided that exercise happens at a certain time, do not spend 20 minutes debating whether you feel motivated. If your important work begins at a certain hour, begin. The more you negotiate with an impulse, the more opportunities you create for distraction to win. This does not mean ignoring genuine exhaustion, illness, or important circumstances. Discipline requires judgment. A sustainable routine respects your physical and mental limits while still maintaining meaningful standards. Another important part of non-negotiable habits is tracking. You do not need an elaborate system. A simple record can show whether you are actually doing what you promised yourself. Tracking creates evidence. Instead of relying on the feeling that you are becoming disciplined, you can see the pattern of your actions. Over time, this evidence strengthens self-trust. Every time you complete a difficult task despite not feeling motivated, you prove that your behavior can be stronger than your temporary emotions. Your identity begins to change. You stop thinking of discipline as something you occasionally perform and start seeing it as part of who you are. You become the person who keeps commitments, protects priorities, and returns to the routine after setbacks. This is how small habits organize a life. They create structure around your goals, reduce decision fatigue, and make progress more predictable. The goal is not to create a rigid existence where every minute is controlled. The goal is to establish reliable behaviors that continue carrying you forward even when excitement disappears. When your important habits become non-negotiable, you no longer need to repeatedly ask yourself whether you will take action. You have already decided roam what creates chaos, because organizing your life is not only about adding better habits, creating schedules, or becoming more productive. Sometimes the most powerful change comes from identifying what should no longer be present. People often try to improve their lives by adding more tasks, more goals, more routines, more commitments, and more information, while ignoring the things that constantly create disorder. You cannot build a calm and disciplined life if you continue protecting the habits, relationships, commitments, and distractions that repeatedly pull you away from your priorities. Chaos often begins with small things that appear harmless. One unnecessary notification becomes dozens. One postponed task becomes a growing list. One meaningless commitment becomes another responsibility. One argument becomes hours of emotional exhaustion. Over time, these small sources of disorder accumulate until your mind feels crowded before the day has even begun. The first step is to identify what repeatedly consumes your attention without producing meaningful value. Look at your daily life honestly. Which activities leave you distracted? Which commitments do you accept simply because you are afraid of disappointing someone? Which conversations repeatedly become arguments? Which digital habits steal hours? Which unfinished tasks remain in the background of your mind? You do not need to remove everything enjoyable or difficult. You need to distinguish between necessary difficulty and unnecessary chaos. Some responsibilities are unavoidable. Family obligations, work, study, and important relationships require effort. The goal is not to escape responsibility. It is to stop creating additional problems through poor boundaries and careless habits. One major source of chaos is saying yes too often. Many people believe that being available for everyone makes them helpful or valuable, but constant availability can destroy their ability to focus on their own responsibilities. Every yes consumes time, attention, and energy. Before accepting a request, ask whether it is genuinely necessary, whether you have the capacity for it, and whether it aligns with your priorities. Saying no does not automatically mean being selfish. Sometimes it is simply an honest recognition of your limits. Another source of chaos is digital stimulation. Your phone can make every distraction feel urgent. Messages, notifications, social media, news, and entertainment can interrupt your concentration dozens of times each day. If you want greater control, reduce the number of interruptions, turn off unnecessary notifications, set boundaries around social media, decide when you will check messages instead of allowing every alert to dictate your attention. You should also remove unnecessary arguments from your life. Not every criticism deserves a response. Not every disagreement needs to become a battle. Not every person who misunderstands you needs to be convinced. Constantly defending yourself can become a form of chaos because it keeps your attention tied to other people's opinions. Learn to recognize which conflicts matter and which are simply invitations to waste energy. Your environment can also create chaos when you allow unfinished tasks to accumulate. A small amount of disorder is easy to correct, but neglected tasks tend to become psychological weight. When possible, finish small responsibilities instead of allowing them to multiply. Put things back where they belong. Respond to important messages. Complete necessary paperwork. Clean your workspace. Organize your schedule. These actions may appear ordinary, but they reduce background stress. Removing chaos also means letting go of unnecessary guilt. Sometimes people continue carrying old commitments, outdated goals, or relationships simply because they feel obligated to maintain them. Ask whether something still belongs in your life. A goal that once mattered may no longer fit your current priorities. A habit that once helped may now create problems. Adjusting your life is not failure, it is awareness. The more unnecessary elements you remove, the more room you create for what matters. Your attention becomes clearer, your schedule becomes lighter, and your decisions become easier. Discipline is not always about forcing yourself to do more. Sometimes it is the courage to stop doing what is no longer serving you. By removing sources of unnecessary chaos, you create an environment where focus, order, and meaningful progress have a greater chance to become normal parts of your life. Train yourself to finish what you start because completing meaningful tasks is one of the clearest ways to build discipline, self-trust, and order in your life. Starting something is easy when the idea is new and exciting. At the beginning, motivation is usually high. You imagine the result, feel inspired by the possibility, and believe that progress will happen quickly. But as the work continues, the excitement disappears. The task becomes repetitive, difficult, confusing, or boring. This is the moment when discipline becomes more important than motivation. Many people have a long history of beginnings, but very few completed projects. They start books but never finish them. They create routines but abandon them after several days. They begin courses but leave them halfway through. They make plans for businesses, fitness, learning, or personal improvement, but repeatedly move to something new whenever the original challenge becomes uncomfortable. This creates a dangerous pattern because every unfinished commitment remains somewhere in the mind. Even when you are not actively thinking about it, an unfinished task can create mental pressure. You know you said you would complete it, and every time you remember it, you receive another reminder that your actions did not match your intentions. Finishing, therefore, becomes more than completing a task. It becomes a way of rebuilding trust with yourself. Start by becoming realistic about what you commit to. You do not need to finish every idea you have ever started. Some projects should be abandoned because circumstances changed, the goal is no longer valuable, or the strategy clearly does not work. The important distinction is between consciously ending something and quitting because discomfort appeared. Before abandoning a task, ask yourself why you want to stop. If the answer is simply that you are bored, frustrated, afraid, or distracted, continuing may be exactly what you need. If the project no longer serves a meaningful purpose, ending it deliberately may be wiser. Once you commit to something worthwhile, divide it into smaller steps. Large projects can feel overwhelming because the final result seems distant. Breaking the work into manageable actions creates visible progress. Instead of thinking about writing an entire book, focus on completing the next section. Instead of thinking about transforming your health, focus on today's workout. Instead of worrying about mastering an entire skill, practice one specific component. Completion becomes easier when your attention is directed toward the next action rather than the entire mountain. You should also learn to finish before rewarding yourself with distraction. If you constantly interrupt difficult work with entertainment, you train yourself to escape whenever resistance appears. Create a simple rule. Complete the important task first, then enjoy your leisure. This teaches your mind that responsibility comes before reward. There will still be days when you fail to finish what you planned. Do not turn one failure into an identity. Review what happened. Maybe you underestimated the time required. Maybe your schedule was unrealistic. Maybe distractions were stronger than expected. Adjust the system and begin again. Discipline does not mean never failing. It means refusing to make failure permanent. Finishing also strengthens your reputation with others. When people know that you complete what you promise, they become more willing to trust you with important responsibilities. Reliability is built through repeated evidence, not through confident statements. The same principle applies internally. Every completed commitment tells yourself, when I decide something matters, I can follow through. Over time, this changes your identity. You become less interested in constant novelty and more interested in mastery. You learn that meaningful results often appear after the excitement has disappeared. The ability to stay with something through difficulty separates temporary enthusiasm from genuine discipline. Finish the important work, complete the responsibility, keep the promise, continue when the task becomes ordinary. Let completion become a standard rather than an occasional achievement. Make discipline part of your identity because lasting change becomes easier when discipline is no longer something you occasionally perform, but something you believe reflects who you are. Many people approach discipline as a temporary challenge. They say they will wake up early for 30 days, exercise for a few weeks, stop using their phone so much, or follow a strict routine until they reach a specific goal. This can work for a short period, but when discipline is treated only as a temporary activity, it becomes easy to abandon when motivation disappears. A deeper approach is to change the way you see yourself. Instead of saying, I am trying to become disciplined, begin acting like a person who values discipline. Identity is built through repeated behavior. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen the belief that you are reliable. Every time you choose focused work over unnecessary distraction, you reinforce the identity of someone who can control attention. Every time you organize your environment instead of ignoring the disorder, you reinforce the identity of someone who values order. These actions may seem small, but repeated actions become evidence. Eventually, you no longer need to convince yourself that you are disciplined because your behavior demonstrates it. The first step is to define the standards you want to live by. Ask yourself what kind of person you want to become. Do you want to be reliable, focused, organized, patient, consistent, and capable of finishing difficult tasks? Once you identify these qualities, translate them into behaviors. Reliability means keeping promises. Focus means protecting your attention. Organization means putting things in order before they become chaotic. Patience means continuing when results are slow. Discipline becomes real when values become actions. You should also stop depending on emotional states. A disciplined person does not expect to feel motivated every morning. They understand that feelings fluctuate. Some days will feel easy, while others will feel heavy. If your standards change every time your mood changes, your progress will remain unstable. Instead, create minimum standards that remain consistent. Perhaps you decide that no matter how busy the day becomes, you will complete a certain amount of meaningful work, exercise for a reasonable period, or spend time developing an important skill. The standard should be challenging enough to matter, but realistic enough to survive difficult days. Identity also grows through how you respond to failure. You will miss days, you will procrastinate, you will make poor decisions. The danger is not making a mistake. The danger is using the mistake as proof that you are incapable of discipline. A person building a disciplined identity treats failure as information. Ask what caused the failure and what can be changed. If your routine repeatedly collapses because it is unrealistic, redesign it. If your phone constantly interrupts you, change the environment. If you underestimate how long tasks take, adjust your planning. Discipline becomes stronger when you solve problems instead of simply criticizing yourself. Your identity is also influenced by the people and environments around you. If you constantly surround yourself with habits that encourage distraction, disorder, and impulsive behavior, maintaining your standards becomes harder. You do not need to isolate yourself, but you should recognize what influences your behavior. Spend more time around people who respect responsibility, growth, learning, and self-control. Create environments that make disciplined actions easier. Eventually, discipline becomes less about forcing yourself and more about acting consistently with who you believe you are. You no longer ask whether you should complete the task because completing it is simply what someone like you does. You no longer need applause for maintaining your standards because the reward is self-respect. You understand that a disciplined life is not created through one dramatic transformation. It is constructed through hundreds of ordinary decisions. You wake up and do what matters. You organize what is disorganized. You finish what you start. You protect your attention. You say no when necessary. You return to the routine after setbacks. Each action becomes another piece of evidence supporting your identity. Over time, the identity becomes stronger than temporary impulses. You become someone who can trust himself to act according to his priorities, even when comfort, distraction, or fear offers an easier alternative. That is the deeper of discipline, not simply controlling your behavior for a short period, but becoming the kind of person whose behavior naturally reflects order, purpose, and self-command.